Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some of the fastest campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. But what do I mean by a fast campaign? I'm talking about the campaign you can do in the least amount of hours possible in the game at the moment. Not the number of turns, the amount of hours to achieve your long campaign victory condition. First off, your short campaign victory condition, then your long campaign victory condition, and then beating the endgame crisis to win the campaign. Or otherwise you have to take a ridiculous portion of the campaign map, which can take fairly long. Regardless, the best option when you have to just achieving the campaign state, going to that campaign victory screen, is to trigger the endgame crisis either early or on long victory. Now, I do prefer to trigger it on long victory because that way I'll be certain that I'll be in a pretty good campaign state, though this is not necessarily the case. Certainly, there are some legendary lords that can enable the endgame crisis earlier. The easiest endgame crisis to deal with, by the way, is the Black Pyramid one, because you only have to go deal with the Black Pyramid of Nagash. Yes, this can be difficult for certain legendary lords to get to, but if you know you're going to go there, it is the best possible option that you do have available if you want to win the campaign in the fastest possible way. Though ideally triggering on long victory, because by doing so and setting a fast early warning timer, like let's say 2 turns, 3 turns, something like that, because if you're triggering this on long victory and you know it's going to happen, then an early warning timer is not necessarily going to add a huge amount to it. Depends on the campaign though, certain situations. Obviously you do have some flexibility when it comes to the speed of your campaign through this, because if you beat the endgame crisis, then Black Pyramid endgame crisis specifically, you achieve the campaign victory state. Now, some things that do matter here. Auto-resolve. If you have a good auto-resolve situation, if you're playing a legendary lord in a campaign where you can auto-resolve the vast majority of the battles, and that doesn't hurt you, to be clear, that you're not losing your potential by doing so, then that's a great situation. If you have good casualty replenishment as well, it is important. Both of those goes hand in hand, because having a good auto-resolve situation doesn't really mean much if you can't replenish the losses you're taking very quickly, because you will take losses by auto-resolving battles. Those are just two very important things. And it's for that reason of auto-resolve that someone like Tarax isn't on the list, because while he's certainly powerful, and while he can do his campaign in a fairly at a fairly rapid rate, you're going to have to fight a lot of manual battles with him, or the vast majority of battles during the course of your campaign, and that's obviously not ideal when it comes to speed. If you want to beat the campaign very quickly, then you're going to want to auto-resolve as many battles as possible. Not all of them, of course, but still a fair amount. You should be able to auto-resolve the majority, if not the vast majority of battles in your campaign, and that certainly doesn't apply to Tarax. What about Skarbrand? He certainly has an army that can auto-resolve battles, yes, but here's the thing about Skarbrand. If you're auto-resolving battles with him, that's not really an ideal situation in his campaign, because his campaign potential is really unlocked by fighting the battles manually, taking minimal casualties, moving on from battle to battle to battle in the same turn. Some people have played Skarbrand campaigns, of course, where they do auto-resolve a lot, but those aren't the fastest Skarbrand campaigns. A fast Skarbrand campaign is one which you can beat by, I don't know, turn 20 or something along those lines, by fighting a lot of battles manually, taking minimal casualties, fighting a lot of battles in a single turn. So Skarbrand and Tarax don't win it, because for Skarbrand's situation though, it's because if you're having to fight a lot of battles manually, then that's going to slow you down. You spend time in the loading screens, you're spending time in the battles. If you can just auto-resolve the battles in a campaign, that is a much better situation if you're trying to do a campaign very, very quickly. Now, number 5, we start with Alith Anar of the High Elves. The High Elves have a great deal of campaign potential and can have pretty good campaigns in terms of their speed, though not necessarily the fastest in the game. They do have some issues when it comes to doing campaigns very, very quickly. But Alith Anar is the fastest of the High Elves. That's because he has better movement than all of them due to the underway mechanic, so he can bypass a lot of terrain that would slow him down otherwise. He gets the ambush stance stalking for all of his armies. So he can use the underway in all of his armies, he can use the ambush stance, the stalking stance, in every single one of his armies. And needless to say, an ambush as default movement stance gives you a lot of power. it helps you actually even an auto-resolve when it comes down to it. A second thing that Alith Anar does have in his campaign, though these missions will be randomized at the beginning of the campaign, but a second thing that he has are these missions. These can give you a lot of money, influence, which means power. Influence is useful for recruiting good heroes, good lords, so having that is useful. You might have to start this campaign a couple of times to get a mission against this particular lord that gives you good effects and having missions that you can actually do, because over here, like getting a mission against the enemy that Sinnelleos is going to defeat on turn 1 isn't really an ideal scenario. If you had a mission instead against this one and a mission against this one, that would be a much better situation. So there's a lot of potential to get a lot of things done very, very quickly in Alith Anar's campaign. And you're certainly very powerful and capable of defeating all your foes. And the thing about High Elven campaigns, the campaign victory conditions require you to, the long campaign victory conditions require you to deal with the Dark Elven factions. Now, some of these can be far away, but you do have access to them faster as Alith Anar than any other High Elf. So, Morathi is actually one of the furthest away from you. Well, technically speaking, from a perspective, you could say Lokir or Rakar farther away, but still, you can kill Malekith pretty quickly, you can kill Hellebrand pretty quickly. And the thing about the Alith Anar's army and the High Elves in general is they actually do pretty decently when it comes to auto-resolve. They don't have the best auto-resolve situation in the game because they don't have the best heavily armored units in the game. That's certainly a downside if you're playing a High Elven campaign, especially with Alith Anar, because his Shadow Warriors certainly aren't going to have some of the very best armor of the High Elven roster. So you're going to have to fight more battles in this campaign than some other campaigns, but at the same time you have so much money that you can afford more armies, which obviously having more armies to deal with threats helps your auto-resolve situation, and you go from battle to battle to battle, never really being under a significant threat as Alith Anar, with his army at the very least, wiping out your enemies. He also has another benefit in his campaign, at least for himself, in that he gains 15% campaign movement range after a battle. Needless to say, this is always a powerful benefit. It gives him a lot more flexibility when it comes to campaign movement. Now, of course, he does have a tricky situation over here when it comes to the fact that he has Be'lakor and Hellebrand to the north, that both of which are going to attack you. But here's the thing as Alith Anar, you have the potential of making so much money so quickly that you can not only afford a full stack of Shadow Walkers on Alith Anar, who has a major upkeep benefit on himself, but you can also afford a full army pretty quickly over here to defend. And if Be'lakor and Hellebrand decide to suicide themselves against your defenses over here, especially once you get these settlements to tier 3, they'll just lose a lot of men, you'll gain a lot of money, defeat traits, which will help you achieve your campaign success that much faster. So you deal with Sinnelleos, you deal with the situation, you deal with Malekith, Hellebrand, and then you take the sea lane over here that will put you right here. And then it's just a quick hop away to, well, not so quick, but still, within reach to go deal with Rakar. And then you go to Cafe and deal with Lokir. And obviously you should wipe Morathi. Like, the first thing you should actually do here is wipe out Morathi. Once she's dealt with, deal with Rakar, deal with Lokir. And that's how you win this campaign relatively quickly when it comes down to it. So, powerful armies, good replenishment. The High Elves do have good replenishment, though some limiting factors. You can only increase hero capacity at tier 4, and until tier 4 you won't be able to access Handmaidens if you're playing as Alith Anar, which is a bit of a downside, of course, but you will be able to get a noble fairly quickly in your campaign, so you'll be able to access campaign replenishment fairly quickly if you're playing this particular campaign. In fact, one of the things you may want to do is actually get that noble very quickly, and then destroy this building, get the economic building. Just get the noble very, very quickly, get access to that replenishment he's going to be able to provide. Maybe after you've gotten a bit of influence, you can get the noble with better stats. That is really going to help you out over here. And number 4, we have Morathi of the Dark Elves. I knew I wanted to put the Dark Elven Legendary Lord on this list. I know a lot of people don't think highly of the Dark Elves, but they actually have a lot of campaign potential in all of their campaigns. Morathi especially, because while she doesn't have a Black Arc from the very beginning of her campaign, she can get access to it relatively quickly in her campaign and unlock the recruitment of Black Arc Corsairs. But here's the thing about Morathi. She only has one weak enemy to deal with at the start of her campaign. None of her neighbors actually hate her. In point of fact, she does start with a non-aggression pact with Hexoatl. She's not necessarily going to get involved in a war with these factions unless you choose to do so as a player, maybe to get some money from Hexoatl, or maybe to take the Ziggurat of Dawn to sell it to Mazamundi to get some more money. But suffice it to say, having weak enemies in itself is a significant campaign potential. And you can certainly auto-resolve a vast number of battles in Morathi's campaign, because this army is going to be ridiculous. You recruit Dark Shards, you recruit Dark Shards with shields, you get the tier 2 barracks within 2 turns, get a bunch of Dark Shards with shields. You give all of that to Morathi, you get the second army. You leave this second army back home while Morathi goes in the west, wipes out the Skaven in this particular province, selling the territory as you move on to Mazamundi, making a lot of money and achieving a military alliance with him in the process. Basically selling all the territory all the way to here. When you arrive here, you're going to encounter the Sisters of Twilight. You wipe them out. You have the army to do so. It isn't a really difficult fight. You take this province either through Confederation, if they've been weakened enough by the Sisters of Twilight. Don't engage with them diplomatically, because you might have to declare war on them. It depends on what's happened to them. Like, you might be in a position where they might be willing to confederate with you, which would be great, because you could take this capital at a higher level. Or if not, you just take them out, then take out the Sisters. Sack the Witchwood, it will give you a lot of financial resources in your campaign. And then with Morathi's army, you keep heading north, dealing with all the factions along the way, none of which will be able to stop you. Like, take this entire province from the Sisters, deal with Tarox, get this entire province, develop it. It might cost a lot of money, but it's really well worth it. And with the second army you left behind, you should also get a Black Ark over here. Get the full Black Ark Corsair stack. Always put the units in the Black Ark until the Black Ark stack is full. And then you declare war on this Dark Elven faction and wipe them out. That's the ideal way, and it's actually quite easy to achieve. This is the kind of campaign that really rewards aggression. Morathi has a major benefit as a Dark Elven Legendary Lord in that she has Slaaneshi Corruption. So at a high level of Slaaneshi Corruption, which you'll have in all of her provinces, you'll get the control benefits, so rebellions aren't going to be an issue, which they can be if you're playing a Dark Elven campaign. Rebellions aren't going to be an issue, and you'll get a benefit from in terms of income. So you can make a ridiculous amount of money fairly quickly as Morathi. Lokir is better when it comes to sacking settlements, but when it comes to building an empire, which is critical to achieving a fast campaign success, building an empire is required. And here's the thing, if you're playing on a high difficulty, your secondary army and your Black Ark might just be able to sneak around this Ulthuan coast and take Lothar itself and really hurt Tyrion and Alariel and even wipe them out. That's no joke, because on Legendary very hard, until like turn 30 or so, Noctilus and Nakari are actually going to put a lot of pressure on the High Elves. And that's to your advantage, because that keeps Tyrion and Alariel in check and Elfarion in check. And if that's the case, then you can sneak down here, take Lothern, win the day over here. Or maybe not. Maybe you actually have to send Morathi into Ulthuan. But basically, Noctilus and Nakari really start losing at around the turn 30 mark. So that's the ideal time. If you can take Lothern, you can defend Lothern. The garrison itself here is fairly substantial. Unless Alariel shows up with the Sword of Cain. But even then, it might be manageable. So you take advantage of the fighting in Ulthuan, conquer Ulthuan really quickly, shockingly quickly. When I played Morathi's campaign, I was pretty astounded at how quickly I could take over Ulthuan. And then, yeah, start engaging in diplomatic deals with Malekith. And the one problem you're going to have, however, playing Morathi's campaign, and in general, when it comes to Dark Elven campaigns, is not the Ulthuan conquering part. That's the easy stuff. It's just a long journey that it's going to take to go deal with Teclis, and the long journey to deal with Emmerich. My advice on this subject is take the sea lane from Lustria. Like, go over here to Nagrand, take the sea lane over here, end up here, and then take the sea lane here to end up in Cathay, and from there march your way across Cathayan territory if you want to, and in order to deal with Emmerich. Or you, from Ulthuan, you can go over here through the sea lane along the coast of Estalia, Sartosa, and just end up to deal with Teclis. So it is a journey, but it's not a journey you have to dedicate a substantial force to. Like 2 full stacks will deal with Emmerich and Teclis, no problem. Maybe a Black Ark to support those 2 armies. But the rest of your armies should be continuing to conquer territory in order to achieve the number of settlements required. You can have a lot of armies, and that's actually a very substantial benefit here. On top of that, you have great replenishment because your post-battle options, the main one you want to go for, which is to get slaves, also gives you replenishment. Then you have death hacks for replenishment. You have a lot of hero capacity very quickly in this campaign because you can get masters at tier 2, you can get sorceresses at tier 3, and you can get death hacks at tier 3 for the main control building, which you probably want to build to achieve better control in your provinces. K-Knight Assassins can be harder to get, but K-Knight Assassins don't really matter as much. Another thing to mention about the Dark Elves, and one significant advantage, is they have Black Ark Corsairs from any tier 1 Black Ark, which you, again, can get pretty quickly in Morathi's campaign. Once you get the tier 2 settlement and you build the required building. The thing about Black Ark Corsairs, and these are the main units you should use basically in every Dark Elven campaign, is that they have a really good level of armor, and they'll do pretty damn well in auto-resolve while taking fewer casualties. And so you can end up in a situation where with Morathi's armies, you can auto-resolve like 80%, 90% even of the battles you're fighting in a campaign, with the exception of major fights against Legendary Lords or when you're approaching Legendary Lords. But outside of that, a lot of the minor battles and significant battles, you can auto-resolve them, so that way you can do a campaign much, much faster. At number 3, we have Arkhan the Black. Arkhan the Black is what you take a race that is supposed to start weak and then get stronger as you progress through the campaign, and then just basically throw the rulebook out the window. The Tomb Kings are a powerful race, but they're a powerful race that does start with severe limitations in terms of unit recruitment and in terms of the number of armies that they can have from the beginning of the campaign. Every other Tomb King Legendary Lord only starts with 1 army. Arkhan starts with 2. So he has his own army over here, and he can recruit another one from the very start of his campaign. That in itself is a ridiculous level of power that you have access to if you're playing as Arkhan the Black. And it makes his early game ridiculously easy. That's one of the benefits he has. The second benefit is through his special skill line, in that he can get 2 Lich Priests. So you start with 0 capacity for a Lich Priest, you need to unlock it. Well, here's 2 casters that give you replenishment for your armies. That's the second reason why Arkhan is on this list, and as high up on this list as he is. The third reason is Tomb Kings in general have unit recruitment limitations. You can recruit as many skeletal spearmen and warriors as you want, but any other unit you need structures for. But those structures only give you a limited amount of unit capacity. Like the Hekara warriors, you only get 2 for the open graves. You get some archers, of course, but archers aren't great units. However, Arkhan has a special structure that only he can build this in any tier 1 settlement that gives him Crypt Ghouls, Direwolves, and Fellbats. Now, these aren't the best units, but they're certainly a lot better than Skeletal Spearmen and Skeletal Warriors in virtually every single way this counts. And Arkhan himself can also buff them up. So he gives them melee attack, charge bonus, recruit rank, plenty of benefits when it comes down to him. He also gets 15% missile strength for the Casket of Souls, which you can unlock very, very early in this campaign. When a Casket of Souls is in his own army. Now, starting with our army, 2 armies in itself will make your situation in the early game much easier. You can bring those 2 armies together, because remember, the Tomb King's campaigns are designed around having 1 army. You having 2 armies just completely destroys everything that's happening. You can also auto-resolve pretty much every early game battle, or most of them, very easily. Like, you auto-resolve this battle, and then the settlement battle, you take over a settlement on any difficulty in the game. And then you might have a fight over here against Rapance, though even that you might be able to auto-resolve. Or you can go for Matrix, sell that to the dwarves, get the diplomatic deal with the dwarves, because the dwarves might actually require you to have a fight on your hands. But deal with the dwarves, deal with Rapance, get this territory, and, well, no other faction to the west or north hates you. Like, Sartosa doesn't hate you. In fact, you can get along quite well with them. Luthor Harkon, well, you get diplomatic benefit with him. And then once that's done, you go with your 2 armies, you take the entirety of the Cracked Land, conquer the Great Desert of Araby, and conquer all of Khemri. And that's kind of all you need to do in order to achieve your long campaign victory conditions. Well, you need to develop those elements and get all the pyramids, all the structures there. But that's essentially it, really, and also just continuously expand across this particular territory. But that in itself is pretty easy. So you're going to have to deal with Cetra, you're going to have to deal with Khalida, take over their territories. That's basically it. The only major fight, to be quite clear, that you're going to encounter, the only major fights are going to be at the Black Pyramid of Nagash because of its powerful garrison force, and also over here against Forik Ironbrow. But you start with 2 armies, you can get another one within 15 turns, and also you have the Books of Nagash. Now, one of the Books of Nagash can be found from the Temple of Skulls, which is certainly not beyond your reach. Another one can be found from this Wandering Rogue Army, though this is a pretty substantial fight because there is a pretty powerful army over here. You could throw 2 full stacks and you would have a hell of a fight on your hands. My recommendation is to go for the one here, but remember, the Books of Nagash are randomized. Like, the effects are randomized at the start of your campaign. The one book you're after is this one, the 5th Book of Nagash. You don't need the Books of Nagash, by the way, in order to win the campaign. They're just giving you benefits. But if you can get that one over here, or if you're feeling like putting it in this rogue army, then that can give you a 3rd army capacity once you're finishing the research, 4 armies. And you might even save up enough canopic jars to get 1 army capacity over here. 5 armies, yes. Arkhan is ridiculous. Now imagine 5 armies within, let's say, what? The first 20 turns of the campaign or so, maybe a bit more. 5 armies filled to the brim of undead warriors, maybe filled to the brim with Nehekara warriors, crypt ghouls, fellbats, direwolves, just swarming around the area. No one will be able to stop you. Not Scarbrand, not Malagor, not the Greenskins in the north. Tic-Tac-Toe is always going to be an annoyance. His territory can really slow you down just because of the terrain type, but you might be able to get some coexistence done with him, or just annihilate him if you so desire. But yeah, Tomb Kings are supposed to start slow and get stronger progressively. Arkhan just starts strong and gets stronger as you play his campaign. He is absurd. Cetra has better campaign benefits for a longer campaign, but Arkhan just has a much easier start, and it's always the early game that's the hardest part. So if you want to do a fast Tomb King campaign, this is the best choice you have on your hands. The worst choice would be poor Katep, who has to take the exact same territory you do in order to win this campaign, but he starts, well, all the way here. I'm not sure what Creative Assembly was thinking with that one, to be quite honest with you. And number 2, we have Azhag the Slaughterer of the Greenskins. The Greenskins are a ridiculously powerful race. They're certainly very aggressive expansionists in terms of their campaign plan. And while they're certainly legendary lords that have significant campaign benefits like Grom the Paunch, especially being the strongest by far, Grom does have a lot of limitations because of its terrain type. Azhag is a pretty powerful lord. He gets a lot more money from sacking settlements. He gets a research benefit, both of which are fairly substantial in terms of your campaign success. You get the diplomatic relations benefit with Vampire Count, so you can get some dealings with Vlad von Karstein or Karstein and the Silver Pinnacle over here. But that's only part of the situation. You have only one major enemy to deal with at the moment, and that's Draika, and you don't necessarily even need to fight her unless it's on your terms. So you have a lot of potential in this campaign at conquering a bunch of very easy to take territory, because who's going to stop you? The Norskins here? No, they're not going to stop you. The Empire is easy for any faction, for virtually any other race to wipe out these minor elector counts on any difficulty in the game. So no, not the Empire. The Empire, and the crucial thing in Azhag's campaign, one of the big benefits, is that the temperate climate, the imperial climate, is suitable to you. So you can take over the entirety of the Empire as Azhag, and you can certainly hold it as well against anyone that might oppose you. Same with Bretonnia, you can also take the entirety of Bretonnia. That is a fairly substantial benefit to begin with. Now, in terms of your campaign victory conditions, yes, you do need to take some territories in the short campaign, but you're going to take those territories anyway in your campaign. It's not really not really an issue. You can also get the military alliance with Catherine pretty easily, in point of fact. Like, you should race to Fort Jakova, sell it to her. Maybe if you can take Vitevo as well, sell it to her. That will certainly cement the defensive alliance, and then eventually going into a military alliance pretty damn easily over there. But a long campaign victory condition, beyond just occupying a bunch of settlements, it's just like, oh, eliminate all the minor greenskin factions. I'm like, that's just going to happen on its own naturally. None of these guys are going to be able to survive in the long term. So you have an easy campaign path, with the exception of just having to deal with the insanity that is Draika in a campaign. Your eastern side is secured by the Silver Pinnacle, with whom you may get along with pretty well in a campaign. And you have very easy enemies to defeat in general, lots of territory to take. Most crucially, however, is this. Because of your starting position, you're within striking distance of Grimgor. You can reach Skarsnik very quickly, and you can even reach Grom if you rampage your way across the Empire and basically turn it into a greenskin paradise. Reach Grom, get him, get Grimgor, get Skarsnik as a legendary lords. You don't engage in diplomacy as the greenskins. What you do is you show up next to Skarsnik, maybe get a hero, tail his army, find out where his army is, or maybe just declare war on him and put yourself in a vulnerable position until his main army shows up. Defeat him in battle, and, well, his entire empire belongs to you. It's always a bit of a coin toss what happens with Skarsnik, but most of the time when I've played as Azhag, he usually does carve up a pretty substantial empire, like going from here, where he starts, all the way to here. Because with the exception of Forgrim, no one can really stop him. But what usually happens to Skarsnik is that Ungrim puts pressure on him in his campaign. So you eliminate Ungrim, and then Skarsnik has a free hand. He can conquer a vast empire for himself, and then you just show up, beat him in a fight, and his entire empire belongs to you. Same with Grimgor at the moment in the campaign. In fact, Grimgor, at this very moment, routinely carves up one of the largest empires in the game. That is obviously going to change with the release of the Chaos Dwarves, though, to be quite blunt about it, I don't think that the Chaos Dwarves are going to serve as nothing more than a speed bump to Grimgor. Even though Grimgor is going to have Astrogoth over here in Uskoluk, and he's also going to have Zaytan the Black over here in the Granite Spikes and the Volary, I genuinely believe that that Grimgor's AI is going to be able to overcome that. The reason I say this on Legendary difficulty, unless they give the Chaos Dwarf AI substantial benefits, is that because of the way the AI benefits work, on higher difficulties especially, it really benefits the Greenskins being able to recruit very large and powerful armies. Because their upkeep is so ridiculously low by default, the AI effectively reduces it not quite to zero, but might as well next to zero. So that means Grimgor is able to get a lot of large and powerful armies. Generally what happens to Wurzag and Skarsnik and even Azhag is they just get defeated by the factions that surround them. So Azhag gets defeated by Ungrim and Draika combined. AI Wurzag gets defeated by Queek and Malagor as he overcommits himself against the dwarves in the north. But AI Grimgor doesn't get defeated by anyone, basically. It's like if you almost always encounter Grimgor in a campaign. Now, that could obviously change with the Chaos Dwarves, but even if that situation changes, and I guess it remains to be seen, you can always just, well, hop on over to the Darklands, take out Astrogoth, and, well, the Western pressure on Grimgor is removed from the equation, and Grimgor is likely going to be able to deal with Zaytan. He certainly can deal with Kolic, and he routinely does. Though I guess we'll see what kind of changes are made to the Darklands, but I have a feeling that at least on Legendary Very Hard, it's not really going to be able to stop the Green Tide that's coming out of Saber Mountain. And that's the benefit in this campaign if you're playing as Azhag, is you just show up, you defeat Grimgor's army. Yes, that is a difficult fight, but once you do that, you get his entire empire. And all the other armies as well, if they're still around. So that gives you a significant amount of campaign power. You also start to shaman. Now, Greenskins don't have the best auto-resolve situations, so they obviously can struggle a bit from that perspective. But just the fact that you can get such a vast empire while letting that basically do all the work for you is a significant strength in of itself. And the fact that you can just spend a lot of the early game conquering vast tracts of the Empire, then turning around to go deal with Grimgor and Skarsnik is in itself significant. Hell, you don't even need to deal with Grimgor and Skarsnik. That's just a side benefit. You could achieve immense success in Azhag's campaign by just conquering the Empire and achieving your campaign victory conditions pretty damn easily. Because who's going to stop you? The only one who could is Festus, and while he doesn't necessarily like you, it's like you show up to full stacks, you're going to annihilate Festus. Strika is the major threat, but once you deal with her, and you will have a fight against her own army, just bring overwhelming force. Once you deal with her, no other faction in this entire area of the campaign map, not the vampires, not the Empire, will be able to stop you. None of them. None of them put together. That's kind of the situation. You have so many possibilities with Azhag, it is ridiculous. Just because of the terrain types. Terrain types do matter quite a bit. Finally, and number one, it is, of course, Valkia the Bloody. A Khorne character. If it wasn't going to be Tarax, and if it wasn't going to be Skarbrand, it certainly was going to be Valkia. What is there to say about the Warriors of Chaos that hasn't been said already? They're an incredibly powerful race. No army can stand up against them. They have some of the best auto-resolve situations in the entire game. They have good casualty replenishment. They have just a ridiculous level of power in their campaigns. Good economy, good income from sacking settlements. They're never on the defensive because their dark fortresses are almost never attacked. Just an absolute absurd level of power that you do have playing as them. Now, Valkia does have bloodletting, which isn't as good as Skarbrand, sure, but it still gives you replenishment in foreign territory, which is pretty damn good. And then you have the authority, which gives you replenishment for Khorne units specifically, the kind of authority she's going to focus on, which is Khorne authority. She has a very easy start. The faction she starts at war with only has this one army. Galadriel is not going to be able to stand up against her, and then she takes the Dark Fortress, and she easily deals with these guys over here in Grond, and then she vassalizes them. Yeah, you take over all this territory, and then you attack Grond, and you force vassalization on them. And because they have a gold mine over here, they'll actually give you a good amount of income from this. Like, you can earn thousands of gold throughout the campaign just from these guys. They're not going to be so useful as allies because they're a minor faction, but you have other options for that. You have, of course, the Witch King over here, who you can also easily vassalize and then sell him a bunch of territory. In fact, you might commit some forces to wipe out Grombrindal over here, sell all the territory to Malekith, get very rich in the process, and gain a lot of territory as well. And then there's Helebron, who is also very rich as a faction, and then other factions as well. Like, that's just the beginning part of the campaign. Sigvald as well is a possibility for a vassalization choice. Your campaign victory conditions are, well, it can be a bit complicated when it comes down to it, because you do need to take over certain specific settlements, like Black Rock over here, the Black Fortress, the Last Keep. So you do have some traversing to do around the world, but it doesn't matter. It's not really an issue to be able to capture at least 13 of these settlements throughout the course of your campaign. You'll be able to do so with ease. You'll be capturing a lot of territory with ease. You'll be able to take out a lot of enemies very, very quickly and decisively during the course of your campaign. The one thing you might want to be concerned about is trying to take the Palace of Ruin very quickly. It's a bit of a shame that it does start as a ruin of a settlement, but all the same, there's quite a lot of possibilities in the campaign. Do you expand across the north? Do you go into Ulthuan? Because you can conquer all of Ulthuan and then subjugate all of Ulthuan and then become unstoppable. And when you do encounter the endgame crisis, you might not even have to fight the endgame crisis yourself. Depending on which one is, you could just let your vassals do it. I mean, Malekith, Helebron, Elves, and others, it gets to a really ridiculous level with this campaign. Really easy start, lots of potential. But why this particular campaign of the Warriors of Chaos campaigns? Because everything I've just said here could apply to any others. Well, the benefit of being able to confederate these three factions over here is in itself very significant in a campaign. But there's more, of course. All of Valkia's armies will gain 15% campaign movement range after winning a battle. That's the Khorne benefit. Then she gets 35% campaign movement range when an enemy retreats a battle. So if an enemy army is trying to retreat, they're not going to get away. They're not going to be able to escape Valkia, which is actually pretty important because it's always annoying when the enemy escapes you when it comes to a campaign. Then you can also get quite a decent amount of post-battle loot. But either way, Valkia is just... Valkia of the Warriors of Chaos can have the fastest campaign by far. I mean, Arkhan has a lot more potential in his campaign, sure, in the long term. Quite a few others may have more potential. But Valkia can just do it fast. She can establish a vast and powerful empire with powerful vassals pretty quickly. Of course, vassals can always be a problem because they can break the vassalization if they hate you enough. But all the same, she is in really, really good campaign position. She has good effects to achieve high level of success very quickly, just because of the this campaign movement range on its own, let alone the starting position. And that's it. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.